The Godfather and The Godfather Part II are some of the most iconic films in cinema. Often lauded as the greatest films ever made, not only because of the cast which contains the likes of Marlon Brando, Al Pacino, Robert De Niro and Robert Duvall, but also because of the brilliant narratives and thematics that sprawl over the two films, with the primary focus being the rise and fall of Michael Corleone, portrayed by Al Pacino in what many consider to be the greatest performance in cinema history, along with the more complex and intricate plot of Part 2, which acts as not only a sequel to its predecessor, but also a prequel by juxtaposing the rise of a young Vito Corleone in the late 19th to early 20th century, with the fall of his son Michael decades later in the 1950s. There has always been a debate as to which is the superior film, and arguments can be made for both sides. However, what can be universally agreed upon is that the second film is much darker in tone when compared to its predecessor, delving deeper into Michael Corleone's moral descent, climaxing with the loss of his soul, as well as depicting the mafia in a less romanticised manner, placing extreme emphasis on the cold, merciless and treacherous nature of organised crime. The cinematography in the film is also a major contributing factor, as a lot of the scenes in the film, specifically the ones featuring Michael, are presented with a cold temperature in order to convey the coldness and ruthlessness we see dictate Michael's decision making. In contrast to the scenes revolved around his father, which are not only brighter, but also display a warmer temperature to encapsulate how, despite the cunning, intelligent and ruthless nature present in both men, it was the hardships Vito faced in his childhood which shaped him into a man of family, honour, compassion and charisma. It was these traits of his character in particular that made him irreplaceable as Don, since none of his children possessed all of his positive traits. Sonny had his warmth and aggression, but he was hot-headed and emotional. Fredo inherited his kindness and generosity, but he was weak and gullible. Even Michael, the son whose personality most resembled Vito's, couldn't adequately replace him, as even though he had his father's cunning, determination, ruthlessness and intelligence, he would also go on to become a cold-blooded and violent man who would lose the one thing he swore to protect. This all highlights the key difference between the two men, where Vito was feared and respected, Michael was only the former. Where Vito turned a business into a family, Michael turned a family into a business, and where Vito was born with nothing and died with everything, Michael was born with everything and died with nothing. However, there is one particular component of The Godfather Part II which I believe demonstrates its brilliance, that being the conclusion to the film, which is not only regarded to be the greatest ending of any Godfather film, but also one of the greatest and most layered endings in cinema, encapsulating the core themes while also revealing new information on existing characters, increasing our insight on them. As throughout the film we witness Michael devolve even more into a man defined by his aloof, angry and ruthless nature, isolating himself from his family due to his business mindset and ambition to eliminate his enemies, subsequently losing them in the process. As his wife Kay aborts his child and leaves him in a scene which many regard to be the scene Michael finally lost his soul, as he physically abuses her upon the revelation. This is further supported in the scene where he coldly closes the door on her, paralleling the ending to the first film. However, instead of Alan Airy closing the door on her, it's Michael himself, illustrating that this time it's not the life shutting her out, but himself, while his dim-witted brother Fredo betrays him out of jealousy and resentment by providing information to Hyman Roth and Johnny Ola, who both conspire to try and have him killed at his Lake Tahoe home in Nevada, unbeknownst to Fredo. Upon the realization of his brother's betrayal, Michael disowns him before feigning forgiveness at the behest of his sister at their mother's funeral. This all culminates with Michael committing his most heinous act in the midst of eliminating his troubles, the murder of Fredo, which he orders purely out of revenge, completely cementing the loss of his humanity. This leads into the finale where, after observing the murder of his brother from his dark, desolate home, There's a flashback to the Corleone family gathered around the dining table in celebration of Vito's 50th birthday. It begins with Sonny introducing Carlo and Rizzi to everyone sat down at the table, which includes the likes of Fredo, Tom, Connie and Michael, while children can be heard in the background playing. A warm ambience is prominent throughout as Sonny and Tom tease Connie about Carlo's looks. Fredo and Sonny playfully fight, as well as Tessio entering with a large beautiful cake, placing it on the table. All of this occurs while Michael sips his drink, quiet and reserved. On the surface, this is all very reminiscent of a positive memory. However, on closer inspection, it becomes much more depressing in nature, as we realise it was Sonny who brought Carlo into the family, highlighting his bad judge of character and the severe consequences which would have resulted if he had been Vito's successor, as well as witnessing the early stages of Carlo and Connie's relationship, knowing how it turned out and how it would be one defined by abuse. Additionally, 4 out of 8 people present in the scene end up being murdered, with Michael being directly responsible for 3 of them. Conflict arises when the topic of discussion changes to the recent bombings of Pearl Harbor, as Sonny goes on a rant about the Japanese, with Tom saying they should have expected it, highlighting his sophistication and intelligence. Michael then joins in on the conversation, disagreeing with Sonny, pointing out the similar beliefs between Sonny and Vito, after he says country ain't your blood, before revealing he enlisted in the Marines. Sonny reacts with rage and has to be restrained, with his children being heard in the background saying he's fighting again, which reinforces his warm yet hot-headed nature, while Tom is left in shock and engages in a discussion with Michael that encapsulates one of the core themes of The Godfather, that being the conflict between individualism and familism, as the rest of the Corleone family are a representation of the former, in contrast to Michael, who is a representation of the latter. This is evidenced through their conversation, as Tom misinterprets the tone of Michael's response to him, referencing how he and Vito on many occasions have discussed his potential future. Michael responds claiming he has his own plans for his future. Tragically, Fredo is the only one to support Michael's decision, congratulating him and shaking his hand, to the annoyance of Sonny, who breaks off the handshake and repeatedly calls Michael stupid, as he leaves with the rest of the family to surprise Vito, leaving Michael alone at the table, smoking his cigarette, isolated from everyone due to his decisions he made in the name of himself. While everyone can be heard in the background greeting Vito, it then cuts to an infant Michael on the train with his father in Sicily, waving goodbye before cutting to the concluding shot of the film, of Michael as an old man, where after his power has been consolidated and his enemies have all been wiped out, he sits down while smoking a cigarette, overlooking the lake by his home, reflecting back on those memories in contemplation, isolated by the decisions he made in the name of his family. In conclusion, the finale to The Godfather Part II not only illustrates the decline of Michael Corleone's humanity, but also adds a new perspective on that same decline, presenting the possibility that the fall of Michael Corleone isn't a case of a good man gone bad, but rather a man becoming someone he always had the potential to become, while also illustrating that no matter the motivations behind his decisions, whether they be in the interests of himself or his family, he was always meant to end up alone, alienated from everyone.